My name is Eliseo Diaz. I'm a Student Link Counselor here at the Student Link Center. And it's a pleasure to be here today with you all. Thanks for bearing the rain. This is a very special event for me as a first-gen student, as a proud first-gen student. It's really neat to create an event that features amazing NYU first-generation students that are very proud and are here today to share a little bit about their experience, most importantly, their first-gen experience here at NYU. So we have our moderator. I'd like to introduce Marisol Moreira. She is our Executive Director here at the Student Link Center. Round of applause. And then we also have our panelists here. We have Lorena, a graduate student at the School of Steinhardt from Miami, Florida. We have April. She's a transfer student at the School of SPS, School of Professional Studies. And we also have Carolina. She is also from the School of Professional Studies, and she's a transfer student at NYU. Last but not least, we have Kenny. He is in the School of College of Arts and Science. Thank you for coming, Kenny, and the rest of the panelists. So we're going to get started. Marisol will start the moderator portion of it.
Okay, thank you everyone for being here. So we're going to ask some questions, and I encourage you to speak from the heart. And there's going to be an opportunity for questions and answers at the end of the discussion. So if you have a question, please jot it down so we can engage, and we'll make sure to try to address it. So my first question to everyone here is, please tell me a little bit about yourself, your name, hometown, major, class, year, and so forth. Lorena.
Hi, I'm Lorena Kansky. I'm a first-year graduate student in MCC, which is Media, Culture, and Communication inside of Steinhardt. I'm from Miami, Florida originally, so this is a big weather transition.
Hello, my name is April. I am a first-year NYU student. As my first semester, but I am a junior in my college career. I am a social science major at SPS, and I'm a transfer student from LaGuardia Community College.
Good afternoon, my name is Carolina Valenzuela. I am a transfer student from Bronx Community College. This is my first year at NYU. I am in School of Professional Studies. I'm a junior there in Leadership Management and Human Resource.
Hi guys, I'm Kenny Hong. I'm a biology major in the College of Arts and Science. I'm fourth year now, and can't wait to get started.
Well, great. Thank you so much. So I'm going to ask you for your definition of what first gen is, and how did you first learn and identify with that definition? I personally am also a first gen student, and I learned the term in graduate school. So a little late in the game, but nevertheless, I identify, and I'm very proud of that definition and that identity. So let's start with Kenny. Can you tell me the definition of first gen for you, and when did you first self-identify?
Yeah, so for me, being first gen is basically just being the first in your family to go to like an American university or college. For me, I'd always kind of had this idea in my head that my parents always kind of told me, like, oh, like, you're the first, and it's going to be hard for you, right? But I never really had, like, a term to kind of put towards that. So when I got to college and, like, at NYU, and I heard about, like, being a first-gen student, that was, like, really the first time that I'd actually ever engaged with that term. And that's, like, an identity that I had to take up in college.
Okay, Carolina?
Yeah, so my parents are from the Dominican Republic, and my dad is actually a lawyer in the Dominican Republic. So I agree with Kenny. It's like being a first generation student is going through the academic experience of higher education in a different country for me, specifically. And also, most recently, because I've been doing just a research for class, and I feel like first generation for me is also the fact that I took a break from high school, and I took 5 years, and then I decided to go to college. So that's another way that I identify as a first generation student.
Yeah, I think for first gen for me was what I've sort of talked to people and is more of a traditional first gen. I mean, my parents were immigrants here. Neither one of them finished high school or went to college. They immigrated here from Mexico. So for me, first gen was first to do everything here. Graduate from high school, go to, get into college, go to college, and ultimately finish college here. So first gen, and I really started being imposed that first gen label as a, I guess, middle schooler when my parents didn't really speak the language, and that whole, oh, you're first gen conversation would come up. And more in high school when I was doing the application for colleges and stuff, that question, are you the first to go to college? And that sort of started opening the conversation more for me and, in the academia world.
Similarly to April, I had the same situation where I'm a child of immigrants, but I came from an area in Miami where everyone, or at least a lot of people in my area, were children of immigrants. So I didn't really take on that label until I went to undergraduate school in Syracuse University, which looks very different from Miami demographically outside of the weather. And I think a lot of that has to do with taking on your own understandings of what that label entails. And I think I realized that I was a first gen as a realization that I was not what the norm was, if that makes sense. So I was kind of othered from the norm. And that's how I created the label. That's how I took on the label on my own without really understanding that this label doesn't have a definition. It's kind of a sub-definition that means like this is minus what the people around me were experiencing, if that makes sense. So I feel like that's how I really came to understand what it meant.
So I think the definition for first gen is very fluid depending on where you are. For instance, some people feel my parents didn't go to college, but my brothers and sisters graduated, and as the youngest, maybe it doesn't mean that I'm first gen because I've had that experience of having siblings that have gone through college. So it gets a little tricky sometimes with people trying to identify, because maybe grandma, went to college, my mother didn't, am I first gen? So we get all these questions. So it's food for thought, basically. So my next question is, what is it like being the first person in your family to attend college? If you can talk to me about those experiences, Lorena.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is trailblazing, kind of being the first person to experience everything, and it places a lot of responsibility on you for your present, for your future, for the future of the rest of your family to come, for the past. Especially in the case of myself being a child of immigrants, that pressure of, okay, this is part of why they came to the US, and so I need to make sure that I fulfill that in the way that wherever it means I have my own definitions of success or they have their definitions of success, kind of coming together with all these definitions of success and figuring it out and taking on that responsibility. So that's what I would say.
I think it's definitely it's a mix of emotions. It's scary, it's exciting, it's nerve-wracking, but it's also something that's expected. And I don't know if all of you can relate to this, but like Lorena just said, it's expected for you to get a better education than your parents did. At least in my family, you're expected to finish high school, you're expected to go to college, and then in my case, you're either expected to be a lawyer or a doctor. And because that for my family and for what I've seemed to relate to other people is that's what being first gen means, is to be successful through academic means and financial means. So it's like you said, it's definitely you become a trailblazer in that aspect, but you also have a lot of different emotions that come into it, and that will later make your journey unique.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. So I'm the youngest out of my 4 siblings, but I was the first to actually get my associate's degree. And my sister's getting her associate's right now, and even that is a challenge within itself, because it's okay, she's older than me, but I finished first, so now it's this certain responsibility. All right, but do you have a real job? Do you are you meeting the certain expectations of getting a academic education? So it's it's also a lot of weight, like you were saying, because it's an expectation, but they don't understand the work that it means to get there. So it's like, we want you to succeed, we expect you to succeed, but why aren't you home? Or like, why are you working more? Like, why are you focusing more on school than work? Those type of questions start like building up. So I think it is a like emotional roller coaster in a way of like, yeah, we're so proud of you, but also like, what are you doing? So it's constantly like having to update your family.
Yeah.
Like, I am good, I promise, I am doing what I have to do.
Yeah, I feel like college is, the time where like a lot of people are trying to become independent. But for us, like you always kind of have your family in the back of your head. And it's kind of hard to break away because you're trying to figure out what you want to do in your life while also trying to figure out how to take care of your family while they're trying to support you through this journey. So yeah, a lot of it has been like trying to figure out how to be independent but stay interconnected with your family and start making new connections with people around you.
So can you share with us how your identity has changed or maybe stayed the same since you started this higher education journey?
So I said earlier that like I didn't really even know what first gen was really, like the term specifically. And coming to NYU was like when I really first heard about this like first gen term. And I realized that there was actually like a pretty large community at the College of Arts and Science, right? We had a club called Proud to Be First, and we got assigned like a mentor. So that's when I really realized that, yeah, there's this like big community as something that I could identify with. So I think that was like the first shift in my identity. But I moved to Connecticut when I was 7, so coming back to New York for college was like a big shift for me. And I think just kind of reconnecting with my cultural roots back in New York, there's like a lot more people that look like me. And it's like something that I try to like take back up.
Yeah, I think similarly, my identity is constantly changing. I think semester per semester, I'm like a whole new me. So an improved me though. So that's good. But when I started at Bronx Community College, it was like, all right, so now I'm a student. Then eventually I developed into like a student leader. And then when I graduated from Bronx Community College and transferred to NYU, it was like, okay, so what am I now? Because like I just worked 2.5 years to make myself into this student leader, this person, this like body this persona, and then once I got here, it was kind of like, uh-oh, that's not me anymore. So what's happening? So I think every semester I go through this like crisis, like, okay, wait a second, who's Carolina again?
Yeah.
So I think getting involved on campus and finding my own community really helped me find my identity again once I started out.
So just a follow-up, that transition period from the community college to the university, how was that? Was it challenging? Was it difficult? Was it, oh, I got it?
So I think I portray that, oh, I got it. But I mean, there's definitely challenges, there's definitely barriers. My last semester at Bronx Community College, I graduated student government president, Law Honor Society, and then I walked into NYU on my first semester. One of my professors was like, you should drop out because you're not performing up to like standard. And I was like, but I'm going through some family emergencies, and I work full time and I go to school full time. He was like, no, you should drop out. And I was like, sir, I don't think you understand, but that's not an option. Like my family depends on me. Like I'm on scholarships. Like I depend on this. So it's been really challenging, but I think being real with myself has helped me. Like just kind of like, hey, you got this, but also it's gonna be hard. Like it's not just gonna be like, like, oh, it's just just walking through NYU and now you got this. A lot of my friends see that. They're like, oh, you're at NYU, like that's so amazing, but they don't really see like the challenges that comes with it, and just the culture shock just within itself. Even I've lived in New York for like 6 years, but just the culture shock of like transitioning into Manhattan campus and commuting and all those different things has really played like a huge role in the impact that it's made on me.
Okay, thank you. Which one am I answering? The identity or the transition?
Tell me about your identity. Has it changed?
Okay.
And because you're also a transfer student, talk a little bit about that.
So my my college career has really been a roller coaster of just emotions, of everything. So when I initially graduated from high school, I got into NYU and I got into College of Arts and Science, and I was going to study neuroscience. For just a bunch of reasons, mostly financial, I wasn't able to attend. So took a couple years off school and ended up going to community college, where I was, I had gone through already a lot of professional development, but this was when I started, it was my first, okay, this is full-time student. You have to, you have to get out of here with a 4.0. I had all these goals. So I went in there already sort of, laying out an identity that I was meant to have. Like, I had to succeed at everything I did, but I also had to make sure that I still took care of my family. I have a brother who's 9 years younger than me, so that was a responsibility in itself. I had 2 full-time jobs, so it was a lot. And then, thankfully, I excelled in school. I did graduate with a 4.0, and I ended up transferring here. Now, that transfer for me happened within 3 weeks. So I graduated with my associates, and 3 weeks later, I was here. So that was a pretty fast transition, and I'm happy to say I'm transitioning well academically, but it is a brand new ballgame. Everything from the campus size to the diversity of people you meet to the types of classes you're taking and the conversations you're having. They're just a totally different levels. Not that they're higher or lower, they're just different, which is a challenge in itself. So I think very similar to what Carolina said, it's just trying to bring your identity back to what you once had. Because I was so accustomed to, being the chair of student senate, being a peer leader, being this, being that, and then here you're starting from zero. Everything from reintroducing your name to everyone, to your professors. You've never met any of these people here. So it's challenging in that aspect, especially when you are expected to succeed, not just by your family, but we're in something called CC Top, which is a community transfer opportunity program. We're expected to succeed within that program. We're expected to succeed within our families, within, our fellow students, because you come from a different background, so you're expected to do a lot of these things. So that identity is sort of put on you, of, the successful student leader. And so now you have to sort of take that on and make sure that you fit your persona into that.
Thank you. Lorena?
I think at this point in my life in grad school, my identity is being built on narrative shifts, like things that I'm changing. For example, changing definitions of success. Mm-hmm. Does that look like me being president of every org I'm in, or does that look like me taking care of my mental health? Mm-hmm. Right? So I think it's really important for me in this moment to really think about the definitions I have for what it looks like to succeed, and think about how that ties into my identity. Because I feel like there's this pressure, as we said, about first gens. Hey, this is how you succeed. You become the president. You win all these awards. You do this and this. But does that mean that that's our personal definition of success? To me, that means being a good person, having a good mental health space, having good physical health, and all those things are really hard to achieve at the same time as everything that we're doing. And I think it was really important for me to take a step back and really think about those things. And I think that's one of the biggest ways my identity shifts, but also just the definition of first gen. I mean, because my experience with that in undergrad, especially being in a program at Syracuse where I was surrounded by so many people that were sons and daughters or whatever of so many people that are really high up in the industry, I started to see that as a minus. I started to go out into the career world and thinking, hey, maybe I'm a step behind for some reason, even though I was in the same academic space as them. And I'm learning now to kind of redefine that, like I said, because I think it's important to realize, hey, maybe they came from this position, but I have transferable skills from my experience. I'm a leader in a lot of ways from what I went through. So I think that's one of the examples of the ways I've been able to redefine my identity.
Okay, so I'm going to be asking specific questions from the panelists. And April, I have a question for you, but you kind of answered it already. So what I'm going to ask you is, you talked about diversity at the university and the challenges with that cultural shift from a community college to a senior college. So can you talk a little bit about what you did to overcome those challenges, as far as where did you get that strength? Where did you get that fortitude to say, I belong here and I'm going to move forward?
So I think, just to quote something that Carolina said, it's, you give the off that like, oh, I got it. And a lot of the times I do that, and internally I'm like, what am I doing? But I think that perseverance, that determination, and as as cheesy as this may sound, really came from my parents, and just seeing their, and it really was a struggle, seeing their struggle working 3 jobs, not seeing my mom for days at a time because she had to work, not seeing my dad for days at a time because he had to work. So seeing that, and then just that, those conversations that I had growing up in, what was expected from me for certain reasons. My parents saying, we don't want you to have to or have the need to work 36, 48 hours straight. So growing up, I already had this sort of, this mentality that for me personally, college and college success was my way out. And although my college experience was very unorthodox, where I dropped out, I came back, I graduated from a community college, came to NYU. Ultimately, my goal was I have to graduate. And so a lot of the times it's hard. It's hard to have the conversations where you need to ask for help, or you need to say, I don't know what I'm doing. Can you guide me? Can you tell me, what resources I can use? Can you help me navigate? Can you link me up with someone who's had a similar experience so I can at least talk to them about it? So those are some of the things I ended up having to do on my own, and seeking out resources. And a resource isn't always an office. Sometimes it's a classmate that understands what you're going through. Sometimes it's a professor that you really connect with, and you're like, hey, I connect with you. This is what I'm going through. And you never know, that professor could have had the same journey, if not a very similar journey to you. And I think acknowledging when, like Lorena, something you said, acknowledging when you're not okay is something that we fail to do a lot of the time, and negatively affects us. Because if we're not okay mentally, physically, it's gonna impact us in the long run. So I think those are some things I had to do, were really, be honest with myself, acknowledge when I needed the help, and really seek it out because it was for my own benefit. And learning to be my self-advocate was something really, really crucial that I've developed over time, and I'm still developing. But it's something that we definitely need, because sometimes we don't have those immediate resources.
Okay. So if we were a fly on the wall during the time that you were applying for college, what kind of conversations were you having with your parents at that time? And we're I know, Lorena, you're a graduate student. Let's talk undergrad. What kind of conversations happened? Kenny?
Oh, okay. Yeah, there was not that much conversation. There was a lot of yelling, actually. Yeah, I think around that time was when we started realizing that me and my parents had different ideas of what college was supposed to be for. They were very into the prestige of college, and then affordability was of course also important. But for me, I got to a point where I was choosing between 2 schools that one was a state school and then one was NYU, and they would cost about the same, right? And it was entirely based on prestige at that point for them. But for me, it was more based on other factors, like coming back to New York and being with a more diverse group of people, and the opportunities that would be in New York over what was at UConn. So yeah, and then sorry, what was the second part of the question?
It's the conversations.
Oh, conversations, right. Yeah, so I think there was just this point where they were really expecting me to get a really high SAT score or ACT score, and that would be everything that you needed to get into a good college. And I was trying to explain to them, that there's more, right? Experiences matter and that kind of stuff, the essays that you write matter. And when they wanted me to apply to all these Ivy League schools just for the prestige of it. And when I got rejected, I was chalking it up to like, oh, well, I didn't really have like the experience for that, right? Like, and I was okay with that. But to them, like they were really just focused on like my scores. Like, oh, like if you had taken the SAT one more time, maybe you could have gotten in, you know, or maybe if you got one more A or something like that. And I think at the time, I just handled it really poorly. I kind of blew up, and now like having that, I guess, argument, we've kind of like established that there's certain things that shouldn't be said, and we try to like kind of understand where the other side's like coming from, right? Like that's all they've really known. Back in like China, everything was based on test scores. There's like it doesn't really matter like your experiences. Like you take one test and that decides basically what your future. And coming to America, that's why I think being first gen is so important. They don't understand that there's like differences in how you get to college.
Right. It's a cultural thing. Yes, definitely.
Well, for me, it was a lot of different things. I graduated in Dominican Republic from high school, and then I decided, like, one day I got home from the call center I was working at, and I was like, I'm moving back. Like, I'm moving back to the States. And my parents were like, you can't do that. I was like, no, I'm doing that because I don't see myself going to school here. So I moved to Jersey with my sister, then ended up working in restaurants for like 5 years, just trying to figure out how I can get back to school because I couldn't afford it. And then eventually I moved to the Bronx, and that's when I kind of like, I was trying to figure it out in a better way. I was like, all right, I'm going to make more money in a shorter amount of time, working 3 jobs instead of 2. And then that way I can afford to go to school. That was like my whole plan. And my parents were like, why are you working this many hours? I was like, I got this, don't worry about it. My mom came home one day. She's like, I went to Monroe College up the street. And she's like, I got some information because you said that you wanted to move back to go back to school 5 years ago. And you haven't. So I was like, okay. So I went over there. They were going to charge me like $500 just to translate my transcript from Spanish to English. I was like, okay, that's not the type of money that I was saving. So that's how I ended up at Bronx Community College. But it was like my parents were really encouraging. But then it was always like for example, when I got to NYU and I was like, oh, I'm going to have to take out a loan. I'm working full time, but I'm working public service, so I'm not making a lot of money. And then they were like, well, why do you have to take out a loan? Like, you just went to BCC and you never had to pay. And I'm like, yeah, but this is different. I think my parents just understood what NYU was like this semester, and just the challenges of having to like really sit down and have the conversations. Like, I've been building my credit so that eventually, I can buy a house, not for me, but for my family. But then it's like, all right, well, now I got to take out a student loan. Now I got to take out a credit card. Like, now I got to do these things. And having those conversations, it's also like kind of intrusive because it's like you've been building yourself as an adult and like your independence. And then you have to like explain yourself because you have like that responsibility to your family. So it's like, I want to be independent, but also I want to be there for my family. So having those conversations like, hey, yeah, I just got a credit card. And they're like, why did you get a credit card? It's going to mess up your credit. And it's like, Mom, I got this, but I had to. So it's a really big challenge. And I think the conversations are ongoing. Like my mom, I'll get home at midnight and I'm like, the train was delayed. Like I got out of class and the train just wasn't running express anymore. So like I stopped to eat something and the train was running local. So just those conversations I think happen every day. I don't think it's even when I just started and decided to go to college. They were really encouraging, but I think a lot of the questions come from like, but why are you here? Because even a Hispanic family too, it's like we have like that family nuclear thing going on where it's like we're all together. So once you kind of like do your own thing, they're kind of like questioning like, are you doing that thing for you? Or are you doing that thing for someone else? Are you doing that thing for us? So I think having to like reassure your family that you have their back while you're doing this has been a constant conversation. I don't think it's going to end anytime soon. I think it's going to continue.
I agree. We share a similar cultural background. And let me tell you, to this day, it's an us thing,
Yeah.
not a
Yeah.
me thing.
Mhm.
Okay, because the education was obtained for the family.
Absolutely.
So April.
Absolutely. So again, when I first was applying to colleges back then, the first time around, there wasn't, I actually wrote about this in my essay, there was never a conversation I had with my parents. My parents didn't know what schools I was applying to. They didn't know the process. I don't think I've had a conversation like, what did you guys think Like, what do you think was going to happen? But there wasn't that conversation because there wasn't an opportunity for it. It was, I was very self-sufficient, and I had to be because my parents just did not have the privilege of being there to sit down and say, how was your day? What colleges are you? But there just wasn't. So there wasn't really that conversation. It was just when I got accepted and denied is where I didn't tell my parents where I got denied. I just told them where I got in. And it was the NYU, it was the Fairfield, the Cornell, and similar to Kenny, my parents were more about the prestige, and for me, I was like, this is my first time anyone is going to college. Like, this is a big thing. So I didn't really have that conversation with my parents. The conversations really started after I couldn't go to college, where they turned into angry, sort of disappointed conversations, where it was more of the like, you were supposed to do this, it was your job to do that, and the relationship with my parents started deteriorating because there was a lot of miscommunication, there was a lot of anger, frustration on both ends. I think I was disappointed because I had failed my parents in not being able to pursue this, this traditional path that they had laid out for me. They were upset because I didn't take that path, because I hadn't been the first. I was supposed to be the oldest, the first to do this. I was supposed to be a doctor and this and that. So this conversation started off with being non-existent to being very prevalent, happening every day. And it was more of like an attack of like, why are you not there? Why are you not doing this? Which now, as years later, I understand their frustration, and the relationship with my parents now is amazing because we've gotten to a point where we both understand what's going on. And those conversations about college are not really existed with me anymore, but more so my brother because he's 15. So it's a very different dynamic that we're seeing now. But ultimately, it's as my academic career progressed, those conversations started getting better and better. But it started off pretty rough.
Similarly, we didn't have a conversation about college. I think it's kind of funny because I remember watching TV and seeing commercials and television shows about people saving up for like a college fund when the baby's still like a baby and can't understand what they're saying. And I remember seeing those and thinking, okay, this is like, that's a TV thing because it wasn't around me, it wasn't around my community, it wasn't in my family. So I think part of me probably took that and said, okay, this is not me, this is like just something that exists for other people. Until my high school started talking about college and college applications and here's how to do it, here's how to apply, but very basically, not with specific details that I was looking for. And that's when I started realizing, okay, wait, this is a thing that I have to do too. And then I talked to my parents and they were kind of like, oh yeah, I guess that is, important. I mean, of course, they thought it was important, but again, I don't think any of us really saw it coming, if that makes sense. No, it wasn't on the mind. And I think once it came around, I was looking at different colleges and opportunities, and we knew I needed a scholarship. So I was applying to this one scholarship, and the scholarship sends you out of state. So that's how I ended up at Syracuse from Miami. But that was a whole conversation as well, because again, as a child of immigrants, these are people that are migrating in groups, that are forming communities, and those are things that take time. So I think that really became an issue because you're leaving the community that took a lot of time, effort to build. Amongst so many other things. So I think it became a really hard conversation of, okay, how do I leave this community, still connect with that community, and define success? Because maybe success is staying within your community and growing there. Maybe it's learning at a local college in Miami. But maybe it's receiving the scholarship and going to New York where there are more opportunities in media for myself. So I think it really became a personal challenge as well as an interpersonal challenge with my family. But that's the general story.
Okay. So, Kenny, how did it feel coming from Connecticut to New York? You made that decision that you're coming to NYU. What were your thoughts first day here?
So yeah, like I said earlier, I was technically born in Brooklyn and I spent like 7 years here. And then I moved to Connecticut where nobody looked like me and it was like really just, I was already shy by nature, and so like for the next maybe 4 or 5 years, like I just didn't really talk that much. And then like as I started opening up, I started like kind of breaking out of my shell in like around high school, right? So it was like gearing up for college. And I think like coming here was partly just like return to like the hometown that I had grown up in. And being back here, I remember I came back and I met up with my family that that still lives here, and just kind of like making those connections again, and really getting to like see how they live rather than just visiting for like a couple days at a time, and like really kind of like reintegrating myself as like part of their family. I thought that was like the biggest thing for me, and then just seeing like the diversity of New York was just really empowering. Just like realizing that there's a lot of people with like their own unique stories, and getting to like learn those stories as you meet new people in all your classes. It was really great. Like, I loved it. But it was definitely lonely at first. I had a lot of trouble like on my first exam. I got like a 43 on my first midterm, and I started feeling like maybe I don't actually belong at NYU, and it was like the first gen community that like really I guess kind of solidified like my resolve. Just knowing that I had other people that were also struggling but were going through the same thing, and seeing how like our mentors had overcome that, it was something that just kind of made me more confident that I also could be like them.
So this question is for everyone. So how has belonging to a group changed or impacted the way you live within the NYU community?
Well, I can speak to that. I felt the need to build my own community when I got to NYU because, so I'm in SPS, which is mostly like nighttime classes, if anybody doesn't know about that. And, but I'm still full-time, so I'm here a couple times a week, but just during nighttime. But like I said, I was really involved on my old campus, so it was like, okay, so now I have this decision to not being involved in anything, because how do I get involved? Getting here at 6 p.m., if that, because I worked till 6 in the Bronx.
Right.
So once I got in, and like April mentioned, we're part of the CC Top community, I was like, okay, so I'll get involved. I applied for like student council, my hours didn't match, like all these things, all these barriers started coming up. And I'm like, okay, I need a community, because I don't know how I'm gonna do this if I don't have that sense of community, because that's what pushed me through all the way to my associate's degree. So eventually, we put together a student group for CC Top, where it's specific for non-traditional first generation transfer students that are facing these challenges. So like the development of personal and professional career choices that you need to make as a first generation student or as a transfer student. We like April said and like Lorena said, you don't really have those conversations like, okay, do you know how to do an elevator pitch? Or like, have you built your resume yet? Have you applied to these colleges? Have you like had your resume reviewed? Like those conversations don't happen naturally because we don't know to have those conversations. Our parents don't know to ask us like, are you actually performing well for like to go to college? Like those questions are not had, those conversations are not had, so those questions aren't asked. And unfortunately, it's a toll that can take a toll on us, but thankfully a lot of first generation students, the conversations we had before, like Lorena said, that like we use those weaknesses to empower ourselves and like those challenges to empower ourselves. But sometimes we're kind of like, how do we do that? So, Rairis and I, actually in the audience, we took it upon ourselves to like start this student group from scratch. We hold the workshops ourselves, we put everything together ourselves. Just because we know what it means for us to not have that sense of community and how it must be for everybody coming in. So yeah, I mean, for me, it's like a must. It's not like a maybe, or maybe if you have the opportunity. So I decided to take it upon myself to find that community that I didn't feel like I belonged.
One other person, if they can respond for the sake of time to the question.
Okay. I think for me, I'm very independent and outgoing. And I think that's been hard with understanding that a group doesn't necessarily define you, it grounds you. And I've really learned that as I've grown as a person, I've developed that understanding. And it's so important to find a group or a community that is, omnipresent, that is always there. Because regardless of how outgoing, how loud, how determined, how perseverant you are, you will have ups and downs. And I say this from personal experience because as outgoing and as, as persevering as I am, I've had moments where I've had to turn to someone. And having a group on campus or off campus, if that works for you, because I'm a commuter, I'm a transfer, so I'm not always on campus. But being able to have a WhatsApp group or being able to have group chat or something where you can say, is anyone on campus for lunch? Or just having those reminders. Oh, there's an event happening today, or whatever it is. Just being reminded that there are people around that not only know that you're there, but that care about you, and that is so important, especially in a community as big as NYU's, to have that consistency. Because that's really that's that push that sometimes you just need to get through that class or to get through that week. And so for me, I found that those groups ground me, don't necessarily define me, but help me grow and build my identity.
Okay, thank you. So this question is for Carolina. Okay, how would you describe the culture at NYU?
I think the culture wants to be inclusive and diverse. I think we are diverse by definition based on like the people that are enrolled, the backgrounds that you come from, the majors that you are, how many schools we have. And I think because of that, we want to be inclusive as a community. I think that we have a lot of work to do. I think that's an ongoing conversation. I don't think it ends with like a panel or a group or an office. I think it's something that just happens and needs to continue to happen. It needs to be addressed. It shouldn't just be like, oh no, we're inclusive. We have that one thing that we have going on that you can sign up to. Like, it's an ongoing conversation about why this is important and what inclusivity means. So I think the culture is around that, and we're doing a pretty good job. I think like anything else, we can improve and we can do better. But that also takes like courage. Like, we have to be like willing to make that sacrifice and say like, this is not inclusive enough, or this is not diverse enough, or just talking about like the benefits and the challenges that diversity means in a community, in an academic structure. So I think the for me, the culture has been, it's had its challenges. Like I mentioned, I mean, I went through that one experience was like drop out, but I've also had so many good experiences while I've been here. I've been involved with the Wasserman Center. I've been built relationships and friendships that I'm sure are gonna last a lifetime. So it's good, it's great, and I think together we're making it better by having these type of things and having these conversations.
So just to follow up, and you mentioned something about speaking up when you feel that this is not inclusive enough, that it's just not enough to have one workshop or a seminar here or there. In your experience, has the institution been receptive to those thoughts, to those ideas, to those challenges?
I think personally they could have, in my own experience, it could have been better. When my concerns have been raised. But I think that, again, that just goes back to the culture and the fact that, like, not to be that guy, but like we have this white male majority in a lot of spaces still, and it's challenging for you to tell a white man, you are making me feel bad, when they're like, no, I'm not. I'm inclusive. I'm including you in this. So it's kind of hard to have those conversations when the problem is what you're having a conversation with, in a sense. So I think it could have been better in my own experience, but I mean, I haven't given up. After that, I just took on more force. I was like, all right, well, that's not gonna work, so let me do this instead. So yeah, I think it could have been better. But again, I think we're working at it as a team. And I think it's important that even if I wasn't heard that one time, for me to still have the courage to speak up and to understand that I belong here just like anybody else. Mm-hmm. So this is my campus just like anybody else that's at NYU. So I have no problem taking making the sacrifice of being the person to say, well, that's not cool. This is not how it's supposed to go. Just for the sake of like a greater good.
Wonderful. Lorena, tell me about your experiences with professors at NYU.
Sure. I think So one of the first things that makes me think about is the way that my graduate program works, which is very participation based. So what that means is a lot of your grade is based on your participation in class discussion. And that's something that's very different from a lot of undergrad where you're getting assignments and things like that that you can do without really speaking in class. And that's scary as a first gen. So for the first couple of weeks in my classes, I was terrified. I wasn't speaking in my classes because the readings are so complicated. I'm Googling every third word and the definition. And then there are people that speak like this naturally. And so I was sitting there and thinking, oh my goodness, like I'm not going to sound like this person, or, you know, the imposter syndrome kicked in. And I think eventually once I caught on, I was more comfortable, but the first thing I did was speak to some of my professors. So I caught them in office hours, which is really important to build relationships. And I told a few of them, like, hey, I just want to let you know, because I'm worried about my grade, I'm probably not going to speak, because I haven't been speaking because I'm not understanding. Once I get a hang of it, I'm usually pretty extroverted. I'll probably be speaking in class, but give me a little bit to really feel comfortable. And I think that was a great idea. It really helped us to understand each other. For some professors, it was really receptive. For others, I think I did have trouble, especially where they weren't really understanding of my background and kind of took that in a way that ended up kind of feeling microaggressive in the classroom. So for example, there was one where I told them, oh yes, my parents are from this country. And they mentioned in a class, oh, Lorena, will you give the perspective from this country? And I'm like, wait, that's not how this works. That's not okay. And it's extremely microaggressive and othering. And I think I shouldn't be expected to give the perspective of the country. So I think, you know, it's not going to be all rainbows and butterflies, but at the end of the day, it's really important. I saw that it was really important to stand up for myself and make sure that at least my position is known to these professors. Hey, I'm here to learn. I'm here to do the thing that I set out here to do. And here's what's holding me back, just so you understand. So that you know where I'm at, I understand where you're at, and whatever gets in the way that I can handle, I will handle, but I want you to have this understanding going forward. That way, you know, this doesn't affect me or your perception of me. So that was definitely something that helped a lot.
Thank you. So this question to the entire panel, is there anything else about your experience as a first generation student at NYU that you would like to share with all of us here? It could encompass anything that we've discussed or something totally different.
I think
Yeah, go ahead.
I think it's important to not feel forced to identify as one thing or the other. Like I went to 5 different orientations because I'm a transfer student. I'm in CC Top. I'm in SPS. I'm first gen. So I think it's important to not try to overwhelm yourself by how you identify, but also embrace how you identify. And don't let other people tell you, if you don't identify as a first generation or as a community transfer or whatever that may be for you, then don't have somebody put a label on you. Don't, whether that be in the classroom or anywhere else, oh no, because you're a first generation or because you work full time or because don't let those things happen. And it's so important to stand up for yourself when those things happen, because naturally we're just kind of oh, that's just been happening my whole life, so I mean it's just happening again. But no, this is it's a sacrifice within itself to go here, financially and in every other way. So it's really important to understand that you do belong, and it's not because you're first generation. You belong because you're here, and this is where you're supposed to be. So however it is that you identify shouldn't limit you. If anything, you should embrace it, and it should help you be a better you.
Yeah, I think definitely going off of what Carolina said is and this is, I think, me just speaking my own experience, don't ever undervalue your journey. Whether you're the traditional, you graduated from high school, made it out 4 years, go to grad school, whether you took the traditional path, or whether you're 24 and a junior, whether you come from community college, whether you're not first gen, whether you are, your journey through NYU is incredible. And the fact that you were able to make it speaks volumes. And I think I've had to learn that myself. And whenever I see somebody say, you know what, this isn't cut out for me, or I'm not cut out for this, it's important to understand, why are you saying that? Is it because you're going through a rough patch? Is it because you haven't found that community or that group that you need? It's important to understand that, like you said, and I can't stress this enough, that you do belong here. You're here for a reason. You're here because you studied your way here. You made it. You're here. Regardless of how long it took you to get here or how you got here, you're here. And it's important to remember that and to really be your self-advocate and reach out to those people that either motivated you at one point to be here or that are here and will help you to continue and finish your degree. So don't undervalue it. Remember that you are, we all bleed violet, and that this is only a chapter of what you're going to do for the rest of your life.
I would add to remember that you're multifaceted as humans. There's no one way to be a good student. There's no one way to be a good first-gen student. There's no one way to do anything. And maybe, for example, in my case, I shared about, having trouble with vocabulary sometimes. Maybe I can't always remember vocabulary, but I have a lot of really good critical thinking skills. So just because there's one thing you may not be good at doesn't mean that your worth is diminished from that, because you are a multifaceted human and there's so much more to you than whatever college is trying to tell you that you are. So I think that's the one thing that I would say.
I'm trying to think what else to add.
No pressure.
I was talking to my friend the other day, actually, and she's also first gen, and I was trying to. She has like an interview coming up, and I was trying to hype her up, and to really own that first gen label. And she told me, it doesn't seem like original enough. It seems like it's something that everybody is. But I thought that was kind of striking. I think everybody's different, and I told her this. You have to figure out what makes you unique, and you have to own that, right? And maybe it's not just being first gen. You have lots of identities, and those are all going to come together and make you, a unique person. And you just have to try to figure out your story. And I think it starts by just having these conversations. Figure out the stories of your parents, of yourself, and what you want your story to look like.
Thank you so much. So I have a question for the audience now. How do you think we can be better allies to our first-gen students? Your classmates, your colleagues out there? How could we encourage them and support them? By being here, I see that. So, anyone?
I have a question.
You guys sitting in the audience, how can you be an ally to other first-gen students? Or even if you're not a first-gen student and you know someone who is, how can you be supportive? Yes, sir.
I think a lot of, especially from what I'm hearing, a lot of that support is affirming their place and the reality that they belong, and not, especially at NYU, not just at NYU, but in New York City. In New York City, it can also be very challenging out there, and you get a lot of imposter syndrome trying to make it in the city, let alone making the city and NYU. And then the presence of support, actually being around, checking in with the people who are in your cohort, you care about, asking hey, how can I, if you're the person who is more familiar with some of the readings, share whatever insight you might have. I think being physically present, being mentally present, and emotionally present, and acknowledging that their experience is valid and it's real, but also that you are there to be a support.
Great. Anyone else?
Sure. I think it means standing in solidarity with you all and demanding the administration get its act together. Because if all of you have had these experiences of feeling othered in a class setting, that means that the administration is not doing enough to put those professors back in check and in their place. That means that those of us who either are or are not first-gen students, we all have a responsibility to allow you to speak out and say, hey, that was inappropriate. But it also means that we should all be writing these letters, open letters to the administration saying, hey, this person has othered me and done it in front of other people, and they have a history of doing this. there's so much else that turns into when you both are speaking specifically about community building. It's not just about community building, it's community standing. Like everyone else has to be a part of it. But beyond that, the larger community is NYU. It's their responsibility to get this together.
Second part.
There's a ditto over there. Yes.
I think sharing resources are very important in terms of. That's great that we agree. I think that we are all different. We all have different interests in this community of being first generation students, or what hold us together. And I think that through our different experiences, we are better able to help one another out. Like I may have had a situation with the bursar office, and I realized that this really worked, and then someone else is most definitely having the issue with how many students is at NYU. Someone else is most definitely having that issue, and I think sharing these things, sharing this cool program that's happening, sharing this cool panel that's happening, all of these things, because we are a community, we are connected, but we don't all have the same listserv on our emails. Mm-hmm. We don't all have the same resources, or even aware of these resources. Like, for example, I didn't know that we could appeal our financial aid until last year.
Okay.
So I was running 2 years unappealed, but I learned, and I made sure everyone around me has learned as well. Yeah, so it's just very, like, these things, it's like NYU does have these resources, but they ain't gonna say it out loud. You gotta find it. Sometimes you gotta go down a whole maze to find it, but you're gonna find it eventually. And like, that's the thing about NYU, it does have these resources, but it's like, sometimes it feels like it's the people who know on the inside are the ones who really know, like, all these resources. So I think it's really important that, like, us as a group, us as so many students here at NYU that identify as first generation, or anything else, like Black Student Union, African Student Union, all of these students are aware of some things, or like in some ways have found these resources, and sharing it is really, really, really important.
Yes, we have to lift each other up.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Glenn?
And thanks for that. Really on the same page there. And I think it's important also to just like smile at someone and offer yourself as like a community, because I think that's what's lacking here at NYU sometimes. Like students feel like, oh, look, I don't fit in, I don't know, I don't have any friends, I just feel isolated, alone. A smile and a hello goes a long way, and just being that community for somebody else.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions for our panel? Yes.
I think maybe the inverse question, how can students who are not first gen be more of support for first gen students from your perspective? Or maybe even how have already examples?
I think being open to the conversations, in my opinion. I think, for example, the class that I was talking about, I had to drop because there was no way of me passing it. And my classmates were kind of just like, shame on you for whatever it is that you did, that you had to drop the class type look when we saw each other in the hallways. So I think being open to the conversation, to understanding, because it's like, if you really ask me, like, Carolina, why did you drop that class? Well, I had to go through a family emergency and my professor told me to drop out of school. So I knew that wasn't going to end well. So I took my losses, So I think being open to the conversation and being open to addressing the issues, because it's something like, for example, homelessness doesn't affect just the people that are homeless. It affects all of the economy. So listening to the issues that are happening, because it affects all of us one way or the other. When you think about it, like whatever information I'm not getting, pretty sure there's something you're not getting because of the lack of transparency that's happening just because you're for a certain demographic or a certain like background or a certain like identity. So being open to those conversations and realizing that we're not alone, but that also means that neither are you.
I think if I could just add to that, and on the other end is, don't make assumptions. There are a lot of negative assumptions that come with students that are first gen, like you drop that class because you're not smart enough, or you do this because you can't do that. That's not always the case. In fact, majority of the time, that's not the case. And I think Lorena said this in prior conversations that we had. All first gen, all trailblazers are so resilient. I'm sure each and every single one of us has gone through things that the other has not. And I'm sure we all have similar success stories where we can say, yeah, I was the first to do that and I did damn well. So a lot of the conversations that I've had with classmates, when they're like, oh, you came from community college, there's automatically that like, well, so you're here academically and I'm here. Meanwhile, I scored a lot higher than all my exams and everybody else. So academically, if we're not here, I'm here. You know, so there's a lot of assumptions that go because you're, you know, community college transfer student, because you're, my first language is in English, and there are a lot of things that I do or say, and people say, well, your accent doesn't say that. What do you? Okay, great, you know, but that my story says something else. So there are a lot of things that come with the labels or with the identities that we have that come with ignorant assumptions. So I think just, and it's human. It's human to, you know, to have certain assumptions, but I think being open to the conversation, like Carolina said, and really listening, not just hearing somebody, but really listening, absorbing, and then reacting is what a conversation is. And a lot of those times we don't have that. We don't have that reaction. We don't have that dialogue. So I think that's really important to understand. If you don't identify, and this goes for any identity, if you don't identify with that, or don't really understand what that identity means to that particular person, ask. Because we'd rather have that conversation than just be, you know, assumed to be inferior in any capacity or anything like that.
I'm thinking a lot about how support looks different for everyone, like how we have like love languages, we have support languages. So I would say to ask, how can I best support you? If you know that someone is a first gen. And I think, so for example, for me, I feel extremely supported by my community at MCC, Media Culture Communication. And I think a lot of that is because we're so actively sharing affirmations. And I think that's like my personal love language. And it's kind of like, oh, wow, so many people are saying things like, wow, Lorena, that was a great comment in class. Or like, even if I've had a few of us say that you should get a PhD. And I'm like, wow, like, I'm sorry. And I think, and that's something that used to be so unheard of to me and so inaccessible. And now I'm actually learning more about the demystification of the PhD and like that some of them are actually paid for. And, you know, I think all of this kind of goes into these affirmations that I've been receiving that have really helped ground me and say, hold on, like as imposter syndrome kind of puts you in a position where you're looking outward, but kind of hearing from the outward in like, hey, this isn't, the way you're experiencing it isn't the reality of what's happening here, is really nice. And I think, I'm not going to say that's something we should do for everyone, because like I said, everyone's different, but that's one way that it works for me, and I suggest asking.
Kenny, is there anything you want to add to that?
I think I come from like a really, I don't know, I was really lucky because I found like a group of friends that were like really understanding of me being first gen. And like they came from like a more privileged background, but like they understood that, you know, I wouldn't be able to do certain things because of like financial needs. And they were like really accommodating of that. Right? And I think that's all it really takes, you know, just like be accommodating and like listen if they have anything to say, you know, because, you know, I don't think that's like something that would you know, like I don't think anybody would look at me and think I'm like first gen or anything like that. So yeah, you know, just like don't make any assumptions.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you all for being here and for sharing your experiences and for being so candid. It's greatly appreciated, and I hope that our audience took some information and felt, you know, connected with one or two pieces or learned something new. And we want to encourage the conversations to continue, of course. And we will be giving you an opportunity to interact with our panelists and I think we have some refreshments. Mm-hmm. So I'm gonna hand it over to Eli.
Thank you. Round of applause for our panelists. All right, everyone, I don't know about you all, but I definitely feel super inspired and proud. Thank you so much, guys, for being here today. I think you have inspired a lot of us here to continue our fight, our educational journey, not physical fights, of course, and also to build community. I think that's very important today. Thank you to our moderator, Marisol. Thank you for taking the time to be here. now I'd like to give like a little thank you for being here for your time. So we have some goodies for our panelists. So here you go.
No, thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I love bags.
Okay. And before we continue to the next activity, we do want to promote another event. The Student Link Center with the social media team, we do host a lot of different events, not only first gen focused, but across the platform for the services that we offer. So our next event is going to be a digital event on our at NYU Student Link accounts on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and even YouTube. So this will be a Be Financially Fit. It's a part of our financial literacy or financial education portion that we do focus on and promote. So tune in every Monday in the month of April. It'll be on our social media accounts. Alrighty, so all of you guys have like a bingo sheet, right? A networking bingo. So no pressure, but now is our time to network. And I know networking is a little interesting for a lot of people. It's very awkward for some, for others not so much. So I encourage you all to get up and interact with one another. We are going to bring light refreshments in a bit, so you guys can enjoy. And again, thank you so much for coming, and I hope you all stay dry. Thanks again. Thank you. Let's network.